don't know a lot about the people coming in. I don't know whether they wanted to be there or not. I don't know how much experience they have or not. I don't know whether they're going to be comfortable with some of the things that I'm going to ask them to do and challenge some of their preconceptions. So there has to be an element of performance to it, which I have learned from people like the people on the stage. So for the next half an hour or so, I'm going to be chatting to these guys. There's then going to be some time to ask questions, so don't worry if we don't cover something that you desperately want to know. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So starting with a man whose name inevitably mapped out his career, Mr. Neil Mullarkey.
Nominative determinism. Well, I did a show called All That Malarkey some years ago where I said, anybody who's called Mullarkey, come along, bring your birth certificate and show me it's not just comedians. So my brother's an accountant. One is...
Your brother's called Mullarkey, is he?
Yes, it's curious. They haven't ditched the name, accountant and a chemical engineer. So I looked in the phone book, this is some years ago, how many Mullarkeys are there in London? Hardly any. First, I said, anybody called Mullarkey, whatever spelling, gets in for free. And 25 people turned up. Oh, we're ex-directory. Young people won't know what that means, but they were obviously too embarrassed by their name. So Mullarkey is my name, but people used to think it was a made-up name. But I started in comedy. I was in the Cambridge Footlights, so writing comedy sketches. And then I met a man called Mike Myers, who introduced me to improv comedy, which I've done now for nearly 40 years. If you're close to the ladies' toilet, you'll see our Guinness World of Records. We started in 1985. And for the last 26 years or so, I've been teaching the skills of improv to people in business in terms of how do we think on our feet, how do we deal with uncertainty in a more profound sense of leaders who can't stick to a script because the world is changing. Sometimes I'm just at the lower end, let's just do some team builds. Sometimes it's right up there with complex situations leading to how do we make decisions when we don't know all the data. And I met Neil Taylor in Shanghai, I think, when we were working with Unilever, and I've been impressed by him ever since.
Neil, do you make your own trousers?
So the important distinction between me and this Neil is I was rejected by the Cambridge Footlights, sadly. So I had to go into this pretend comedy career. So I am a writer, I suppose, by training, although I don't really have any training for it. But really early in my career, I started running workshops around writing, and I realised that that was the bit of the job that I really, really liked. So since then, I've done lots of it, but also built teams of people doing that stuff around writing and storytelling and presenting and all of that. And I do think it's a slight kind of pretend comedy career, because what I like, maybe in comparison to you, Neil, is people turn up and they're often, this is your thing about expectations, Alex, they're often not expecting to have a good time. You know, they've been forced to turn up for something sometimes. And the fact that you can either put them at their ease or make them laugh or something, you can see people suddenly relax. But I guess you maybe have the weight of expectation that you will be funny.
There's a bit of that, I will be funny, but also that they have to be funny. So we often do workshops here. I put the mic here, and they're going, oh no, I've got to do stand-up, which is the most terrifying thing, me included. And then I take the mic away and say no, because I actually teach improv. Comedy, stand-up comedy is very hard, on your own, have to write it, rewrite it, and so forth. But yeah, coming to my workshops, there is an expectation that it will be possibly outside their comfort zone, but they always come away saying that was much more fun than I expected, because they're expecting it, because quite often they don't know who I am, or I've been a surprise, and who is this schmuck? Then somebody says, well, Neil Mullarkey, we're here at the Comedy Store because he's one of the Comedy Store players. You know the intro that L&D people give one another, sometimes lacking in energy. So I then bring up the energy and go, yeah, we're going to have some fun, it's going to be all right. So yeah, there is an expectation, but often it's more fear than fun.
And on that fear bit, we talked a little bit in that some of you may have seen some posts talking about nice Neil and nasty Neil and setting that expectation. So it sounds like sometimes it's about putting people at their ease and getting them to have more fun. Is it always that?
Well, where this nice Neil and nasty Neil thing came from is when we were running our stuff together in Shanghai and also Singapore and various
Istanbul, New York,
places around the world.
Liverpool.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like I say, my persona, if you like, to use a slightly pretentious word, as a trainer is, like I say, I do think if people walk in slightly apprehensive, they think they're going to talk about a subject that is very exposing. Actually, if you can get people comfortable and laughing early at themselves, at the situation, at you, then they're usually much more open to whatever they're going to learn. So I suppose I'm trying quite hard at the start anyway to be nice. And then I sat in on one of Neil's workshops and he was just horrible to this person who came in late.
They were late. Everyone else had turned up on time. And therefore, what happens is that quite often it's a bit like, does anyone have any friends or has been a teacher? And you know...
Was the question, does anyone have any friends?
Yeah, yes, does anyone have any friends or teachers? But it's kind of start off authoritarian, authoritative, then you can loosen up. You can't do it the other way around. And a friend said, a teacher said, yeah, actually never smiled before Christmas. That was the sort of thing. And so I sort of set the tone of, yes, I'm from comedy. Yes, this is going to be fun. Yes, this isn't PowerPoint. And you must learn X, Y, Z. But actually, it is serious. Because, dare I say, we all might agree that communication is probably 90% of what people have to do. It sounds kind of soft and touchy-feely, but luckily for my book, which I will give you a copy of later, I found that communication can cost billions of dollars, $3 billion to the US economy, for example, 1 year. It's things like that, bad emails, people getting cheesed off, poorly worded. So things like that. So I try and remind people, this is serious. They're paying me money and you money not to do your job for a day, to do something that actually could, if we then use it properly, could make a huge difference to your business in a way that perhaps watching an anti-fraud video won't.
Because you all remember those really, really well, right?
I'm part of a group of people who've they've run away from corporate life. And one of the things, because I've never had a job, and they all have, and now they're kind of saying, isn't it great to be freelance? And one of the guys said, aren't we all glad we don't have to watch those anti-fraud videos every 6 months? And then I found that some EY people were sacked because they were watching 4 at the same time. They weren't watching them. It was just, they can detect whether you're watching or not, but they didn't realize you could detect whether you're watching them concurrently.
Interesting. And I guess you've talked about wanting to get command of the room, having a persona, having people feel a certain way as they go in. But there's going to be more kind of, for want of a less sort of ridiculous word, philosophy to it than that coming into the room, because they've got to take something away as well. Yes, they feel comfortable, they've got to try things out, but now they've got to remember something. So what are you bringing to the session to try and get them to remember to take something away?
Well, Maya Angelou said people won't remember what you said, but the way you made them feel, that's one thing. So you've got to make, so laughing, and the data says, if we're laughing, we'll learn more. Emotion and laughing and emotion and learning are not separate. I wrote a whole thing about this in one of my books, and the editor cut out the whole thing. But it was basically, if you're feeling a bit of emotion, that could be fear, could be laughter, you're going to be more engaged. But I feel very strongly that if people are paying me, then the participants need to come away with something. And I believe they won't come away with something if they haven't practiced it. Some of this stuff you can understand rationally, and I try and give data and slides and handouts. But I also say you won't really know until you've done it, like riding a bike. You don't learn to swim by watching a video. So I think they have to experience it, and with that will come a dip. And with that will come, actually, it's not so bad after all. Actually, if I follow a simple rule or let myself be in the right state, I can do something which I can replicate in real life.
The dip is interesting. That's something that quite often we prepare people for, is, just so you know, when you try your presentation again that you did the first time terribly, we've given you all this feedback, you might get worse. Just because actually it's a lot to process, to take on board feedback and rethink how you've always done things. A thing I tell people who we are training, and it's true just as much for us as well, The awful truth, if you look at all the stats on this stuff, is most people don't remember most of what you tell them. So they will remember the feeling stuff more, but also, I guess, over the years, I've learnt to craft sessions in such a way to kind of go, well, look, if they only remember this one thing, even this one thing has the power to change quite dramatically what they do in their day-to-day life. So I guess I'm quite often structuring around that. And even the fact that you said there's a dip, there's a journey to the course of a session in the same way that there's a journey to a story or a stand-up set or whatever. So it's weird, actually. This is quite meta because it's making me think about the shape of the things that we do as trainers when quite often we're training people in the shape of what they do as communicators. There's one other thought that occurred to me when you talked about philosophy. We've now post-rationalised this at definition really well, but there's things that we did for years and years in training that when I started to find out about behavioural science, I was like, oh, that's got a name. And now I can justify it to the accountants who I'm training because it's got some science behind it. But for instance, there is something called the door in the face effect, which basically says in behavioural science, if you ask someone for something enormous, to a favour or to lend you a big amount of money or whatever, they're very likely to say no. But once they've slammed that door in your face, if you ask for something smaller, they're quite likely to say yes, just because they want to be cooperative and they've been prepared with the big thing or scared by the big thing. And I realised, oh, that's a technique that we use all the time, where, for instance, in writing, something that nearly everyone we train in writing needs to get better at is writing short stuff. Don't make your board paper 20 pages long, make it 3 pages long. And so we effectively do a door in the face. We go, well, rewrite your whole board paper as a haiku, which, if you don't know what it is a super short Japanese poem. And that extreme, certainly when they first do it, feels ridiculous and scary, and it might work, it might not. But the point is, once you've done that kind of extreme thing, if I then say, write your board paper in 3 pages, that feels a lot more doable than the big thing that I just forced you to do. Does that make sense?
And also that's an example of abductive reasoning, which we do a lot in the arts, which is we put it on its feet, as it were, and it seems to work. We don't know why, as opposed to deductive, which is big in Western discourse, which is we need to have 7 reasons before we do anything. Whereas in theatre we say, just try it again, but quicker, or just look that way. And the director will go, that works, I don't know why. And that's it's deducing backwards. So that was an example you just gave me. And often I say to people, just come on stage, try something, and we'll work out later if it worked, and we won't know necessarily why. And it might work for you in that moment, it might not work for her. And I would say the similar thing with stand-up comedy. I have done some stand-up comedy, but I often see people thinking about your shortening stuff, doing stand-up. It was okay. You see them 6 months later, they're doing virtually the same material, but A, they've sharpened their timing, and B, they've cut any waffle. They've got the rhythm and they've got the words. And I always quote the Winston Churchill thing, which is, I'm sorry this letter is so long, I didn't have time to write a short one. People say it's Mark Twain, but he didn't say it. Some people say it's Blaise Pascal. Maybe that's true. But it's just one of the best things to say to people, because I'll always say, who here has given a presentation where you didn't have time to write a short one? Yes. And stand-up comedy at its best is so on the nail. It's, you know, every word, every rhythm, every cadence is properly timed. And so I think training, there can be like that, those sort of bits, and then you'll have the bits that are more improvised. And that's the strain we live under, which is we've got our material, and then how's it landing with that person? How's it, oh, they're way ahead, oh, they're feeling a bit strange. So as you all know, you have to have a bit of script and a bit of leeway. But one time I did a session here with BT with Neil, and then finished at 5 o'clock, and they all came back to see the show at 7:30. And Neil said to me, you know, I've been talking about training sessions and tiring, to the client, and what have you done between now and then? I said, I've spoken to nobody. I went for a walk, because you need to decompress. And I would say, not dissimilar with stand-up comedy, for sure. It's really hard. It just looks like somebody's saying words, but every word has been well crafted, written, rewritten, played in front of an audience, work in progress. Then they're confident enough to maybe do some ad-libbing. But I think there's a similar performance anxiety or stress. Running a workshop is very stressful because you're having to keep the audience on side. Stand-up comedy, they do it for 20 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours if they're famous. But by that stage, they know their material pretty well. And that's what people don't understand, that stand-up is scripted. Some great stand-ups can weave in and out, but they're two different parts of the brain.
There's an interesting thing about the scripted bits versus the improvised bits in a session. So we were doing a big program for a client a few years ago, and it was loads of people, and we had to have loads of trainers running it. And we did a kind of pilot, and the client watched it and said, I loved it, it all worked really well, it was brilliant. And then she went out and watched a few of our other trainers deliver the same session. And she came back to me and she said, I was really disappointed. And I was like, oh no, like, what have we done? And she was like, they're all using exactly the same jokes. And she was like, I thought you'd just done that off the top of your head in that first session. And you're right, some of it is totally crafted, and if someone else has done a joke that really helped land a point, then yeah, we just steal it off each other. Of course we do.
I mean, what a compliment to your performance, though. Like, I thought that you just rolled it off the tongue. But sort of not to put you in the most stressful bit, but you talked earlier about people remembering things if they've experienced them. We have a group of people here who need to remember something from today. Is there something that we can do for them to experience what it is that you do in a session?
Well, we could do that because all of us are
Look at all the faces.
Yeah, did I have to sit at the front? I had to persuade Rachel to sit at the front and Kelly. Listening. Who has to run workshops on listening? And it's interesting because counterintuitively, the basic skill in improv comedy, which is different from scripted comedy, is listening. You're on stage with somebody, you don't know what she's going to say, she doesn't know what you're going to say, and you treat what they say as an offer. So we do this as a warm-up game, and it'll be something that resonates a lot with other listening games where we realise that listening isn't just waiting for the other person to stop. Yes, hello, that got a laugh from that lady. It wasn't supposed to be, it's supposed to be quite profound. Why are you laughing at the wrong bit? What's your name? You're in. Say again?
Debbie.
Debbie, you're in a coat. Are you cold?
I was.
Well,
But now you've said
shall we warm you up? Debbie, do you want to come up with me? Okay, I'll give you a book and a pen. How about that? Come on, Debbie, because this is another people ask me, how do you choose people? I say, basically, I look at somebody who looks like they won't punch me. But also, I've got this, and it's afterwards I say, oh, you've got exactly the right person, because I always try and get somebody who looks like they are senior-ish and somebody who's not so senior, so that everyone in the room can go, oh, I'm a bit like her. Oh, I can see if she's finding it easier than I should. And my greatest joy is somebody who considers themselves not somebody who wants to stand up and be seen, standing up and playing the simple game and winning. And with improv, we win together. This is the thing. So Debbie, should we have a go? Okay. So up you come. Give her a round of applause. I'm also conscious we're filming this. Have you given permission to have this? Okay, well, it may be all right because you don't have a microphone, so anything you say may be lost anyway. How do you feel about being on the stage?
okay.
Okay, well, why don't you come then? Just a moment. Let's just do it here. I'll move that because there's a glass of water. Also, this is nothing with training, health and safety. I once did a thing for Vodafone, health and safety people, and I stood on the chair. Imagine the intake of breath. Their whole job is health and safety. So, Debbie, it's quite bright, isn't it? But your pupils will adapt. I don't know how this will work, but Debbie, we're going to just tell a story as if it's a TED talk. Should we have a go at that? Yeah. What's the subject? Ooh. Yes, exactly. Cheese. No? Go on. Somebody said something. Holidays. Oh, so, just one word at a time. See what happens, Debbie. Okay. I haven't warmed you up at all for this. No. So, last
year
I
went
to
Florida.
Florida?
Yes.
it's multiple sentences. So,
Okay.
so Florida.
Is.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Now, can you see? Where was Debbie looking?
At you.
No. Could you see? She was looking over there. Where was I looking? Because I've got no idea what I'm going to say. Debbie, when she couldn't think of something, was thinking, it wasn't she couldn't think of something, it's because she was thinking of loads of things, wasn't she? Normally you don't jump in straight to that, but it's one I do once I've talked about the ethos of improv, about listening, accepting offers, using the other person's ideas. But it's just a lovely thing to play. Sometimes I make one of the people in a four step out and be the leader. So she or he has to conduct and say, more giraffe, more monkey. But they're not allowed to be in the team anymore, for which some people, oh, I want to be in the gang. And again, it's a leadership exercise. What was lovely, you said, what's your name with the hat? After you were going with your, you, and it was kind of, again, a little leadership moment. And then as I went over there, Mai said too much. The words too much, which is 2 words. There he was, boldly leading everyone else and getting it wrong himself, which is, again, a great leadership thing. But also, just in terms of the science here, who, when I said zoo, had a particular image in your mind? What was it? What's your name?
Trina.
Trina, what was the...
Feeding animals at the zoo.
Feeding animals. Anybody have a particular animal? Most people will have thought of particular animals, giraffe, monkey, elephant, or a particular zoo.
Yeah, I was thinking London Zoo.
Which zoo? London Zoo. Okay, so this is based, I've post-rationalised this like you, found the science eventually, on Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Have you all read that? No. Yeah, Chinny Recon. Who's read some of it? Yeah, exactly. That's more... That's, page 7, but you've got the basic idea, 2 types of thinking. One is, if I say zoo, you see monkey. You don't think about it, it just comes in. And the research says 90% of the time we're in that one, not thinking. Just conjuring up a previous image. System 2 is actual real thinking. So it's a great way to then say, in your sector, or in your company, in your firm or your team, do you have a bunch of stuff that you don't even think about now? That, to do a presentation, you must have 100 slides. When you go to training, it's going to be boring. You go to a conference and the CMO and the CFO and the CEO will all talk and it'll be boring. Or you don't talk to Jack because he never helps anybody. If you've got a problem, always go to Rachel because she's really helpful. Just those things, sometimes it's normally the unwritten ground rules that matter more, I find, rather than anything that's on the website about behaviours and pillars and values, which nobody believes at all.
Apart from the ones that we create for very valuable and done in a different way. Also, there was something really interesting about watching you doing that. Some of you we know a little bit, some of you we don't know at all. Starting to see some of the characters emerging. So some of you, once you got into it, were little chaos agents. I'm like, I'm going to say this word now that totally changes the direction of the sentence. And actually little clue, this might be preempting something we talk about, but little clues like that are quite useful for us, thinking, well, how am I going to use that person? I know that's what they want to do, and I guess that's exactly often what you're doing with a crowd when you're doing comedy. So quite often when I'm doing stuff around writing, lots of what we talk about is quite in a way, sort of counter-cultural and, if I was being pretentious, subversive, like changing the way that most organisations think they have to communicate. And some people really resist it. And sometimes those people could be difficult in a training session. You know, they are the cynics who want to argue with you. And I've learned over the years, I think, that often they just want a bit of attention for that fight. And you can give it to them suddenly. I mean, we keep picking on Rachel because you're sat right at the front, but let's say Rachel is being the really difficult person. Later on, as someone starts to write something better, I can go, well, let's do the Rachel test. Is that working for you, Rachel? They love it. That cynic person is suddenly getting all the attention they want. And they're not usually, well, usually you have persuaded them a bit, and also they're not usually brave enough to say, no, that was awful. So do you do that? Do you start?
Definitely, yes. I would say there's a few things from what you're saying, which is if everyone else sees that John over there, Who's the cynic, who's always saying, yeah, but, sitting at the back? If he's into it, you've won everyone. They'll see, oh, right, you've managed to overcome that person. And a very good way is to win them through comedy. Taking the mickey out of yourself, saying that's clearly, nonsense or whatever. And the other thing, in terms of comedic tropes, I heard laughter in lots of groups. Sometimes the laughter was because somebody said what we were all thinking.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was what you mentioned, somebody said a completely disruptive thing. And that's the thing with comedy. That you can post-rationalize those things, but quite often only post-rationalize. Because next time you watch some comedy, we kind of know what they're going to say. We love it when they do. It's the relief of tension. Freud said that pleasure is the relief of pain. Some comedy is kind of, you need to say it. You need to say poo or whatever. Or it's kind of, wow, where on earth did that come from? Eddie Izzard, Steve, Darth Vader in the canteen, anything like that where you kind of subvert a pattern. Now, I dare say, if you want to go philosophical about comedy, those are two ways to go. And I think in training we use both, don't we? But the power, I would say, to win over the cynic and indeed to make a point that might be too much, in Hollywood they call it on the nose, saying this company is in trouble or nobody works together. It's much easier to use a comedic way of framing that. And saying, oh, generically, sales, they're all just immoral, marketing and just lazy, having lunch, IT, turn it on, turn it off. You create stereotypes, and then later you subvert it, saying, well, that isn't the truth at all, is it? So you get people realizing that their system ones, for example, lazy thinking creates lack of communication, lack of creativity. So that game has wonderful ways to be extrapolated through the day, and not least, you're absolutely right, to notice who's into it, who's not into it. And also say, if you didn't like it, that's data. Yeah. And that's the catch-all for all trainers, which is, if this isn't landing with you, why isn't it? If this felt uncomfortable, what are you learning about how you feel uncomfortable at work? Because some of this is uncomfortable because you have to bear something of yourself. And of course, my favorite comedy is that somebody saying something that we all thought but didn't realize we were thinking it. Not the one saying, look at those people, let's laugh at them. It's kind of saying, aren't I weird? Oh, maybe it's not just me. You know that thing we've all felt? Well, I've named it now. That to me, that's the comedy of truth, if you like. So I think that training uses all of those. Sometimes it's big, fat, hairy, crazy game, everyone running around, it's kind of crazy. Then there's quiet, reflective, satirical moments, if you like. And we're using the whole gamut, I would say, in training.
It's making me realise as well that as the trainer, it's an interesting position. You're sort of, well, we are often outside the organisation. Some of you will be inside the organisation, but sort of outside looking in at the same time. And it's an interesting position. You're allowed to say things that the people you are training are not allowed to say. You can be the truth teller. And clearly laughing at the truth is a less threatening way of presenting it. But you are still doing something that most of the time people won't dare do at work.
Just thinking about that kind of crowd work element and the cynic and the argumentative types, I'm just thinking about, we spent quite a lot of time in Australia training people together, and we ran it as a double session. And what started to happen over time is you would deal with the argumentative people and they would enjoy you telling them to shut up and get on with it. And the ones who didn't really want to speak came to me for a bit of therapy. Like, could you just listen to me whinge about this and then I'll do it? How do you deal with the ones that don't speak up? The ones that don't argue, but they're sitting there, and you can sort of tell from their body language that they're a bit uncomfortable, but you don't know yet what they're uncomfortable about. How do you deal with those people?
Well, first of all, partly allow it for a bit, right? Because some of those people are just thinking and getting their heads around it. So I know there are some schools of thought that have you immediately naming people and making sure everyone's speaking. I let that go for a fair amount of time till I can think I can judge. Is this someone who is just reflecting on it, or are they nervous? And then I might try and ask a question to open them up, but I'm not jumping down their throat because they're quiet.
Yes, you need time, People process differently. And also, often that person you think is not engaged is the one who comes up afterwards and is so effusive. It's just that their way of processing. And that's what I've learned, is that let people learn at their own pace, gradually bring out what does feel comfortable for them. A day is great. Sometimes I'm wheeled in for an hour. It's really hard to do it. I can do an hour, but a day means you get to know everybody a little bit. And you know somebody will really sort of come through after lunch because they've had a think and a chat. And that's joyous for me. And sometimes the early loud volunteer, your job is to keep them quiet a bit and not dominate. So I would say I've learned, people learn in different ways, and they're not as ostentatious in their way of receiving this stuff. There'll be somebody who's saying, this is great stuff. They'll be writing everything down. Marvellous, marvellous. That's an easy win.
It's like Trina.
Exactly, yes. Mullarkey. And in a way, and this was a man called David Firth, who also came from the theatre, who wrote a book called The Corporate Fool, and indeed many others. He said, you know, when you're at school, you're learning something that's quite hard. And so some of the stuff we're asking them to do and learn isn't easy, and it shouldn't be easy. It was when somebody years ago said, feedback forms, we call them happy sheets. There's always somebody who gives you 2 out of 5. And there's loads of people who give you 5 and 4 out of 5. And so your net promoter score, whatever, is 4.7 or something. And the client goes, tick, we'll have him again. And you're thinking about that person who gave 2. And that's fine. My first gigs were with McKinsey, their management consultancy. And they said there's enough people saying, do more of that. Other people saying, less of that. And they're saying, that means you're in the right place. So I think comedy is a way of bringing people out. But for some people, it isn't necessarily. They have a more dry humour, they don't smile or laugh as much, and that's fine. Just take your time. Yeah.
Also, I'm one of those people. if I'm in a training session, I've learned to give a bit more because I'm on the side of the trainer. But naturally, that's what I would do. And I think lots of performers are introverts. So sort of have empathy for those people in the training session. Lots of introverts become performers because this is all on our terms, right? We're like completely in control of this versus chatting over the croissants is hell.
Yes, certainly many comedians and actors are introverts because they can relate to this environment, but chatting over the croissant, exactly right. And so for me, it is learning who's appreciating what.
Is part of the difficulty with the chatting over the croissants, because we talked a little bit about scripted and unscripted and having quieter times and louder, is part of that because that bit doesn't have structure other than a beginning and end? I mean, is that part of it? How much do you rely on the structure to sort of see you through a session?
Well, I'm going to give you 2 answers. When I'm doing a training session, I try to avoid anybody in the coffee breaks and the lunch break. I go and have a lie down. And in fact, does anyone know open space technology? Harrison Owen. Part of his contract was, I need somewhere where I can go and have a sleep. It's so tiring that I know I won't give of my best if I'm chatting over the croissants afterwards. So that's in the training mode. Just like a comedian, when they come off stage, they're not as jolly and friendly as you'd imagine from their on-stage persona. They want to get home or avoid people because it didn't go well. But in real life, I say to people who naturally wouldn't want to be over the croissants networking, give it structure. So I start with a question which is not threatening. How did you get here today? Good one, which is, it doesn't demand you to say what your job is and how much you earn, which is scary.
That's what I'm going on.
And give yourself a structure, which is I'll meet 3 people and go. I'll stay for 45 minutes, then go. That's it. Or I might meet 1 person, but talk for them for 10 minutes. So the thing I teach improv is very much not structured. So the yes and is the basis of improv. Yes and. Yes, I hear what you say, and let me build on that. We don't say yes and, but that's the ethos. In my previous book, I called it listen and link. So listen to what she said, then link your response to something, use a word, just like Wasn't it great when you'd said elephant and somebody came back to elephant? Doesn't that feel good? Very simple rapport building. So that yes, there's no structure, but in real life, networking situations, which can be anything, it's having also the boldness to say, we're finished now. And which is, you've talked to somebody for a while, you've given lots of good eye contact, you've found out enough, you've promised to find them on LinkedIn, and you both know we're done now. And normally it's, I must get another drink, or I'm going to go to the toilet. And this is somebody called Kate Atkin, who said, at the end of an encounter, make sure you introduce them to somebody else. You might even say, you must talk to Neil. He loves singing in a choir on a Wednesday. Okay, so you've already created an offer for you then to say, oh, that's interesting.
Slightly scared that you've remembered that.
Well, it's just because the Comedy Store Players used to do Sundays, used to do Wednesdays as well. And he was always, oh, no, I've got my choir. You can't come and see a show, except for that one day when it was BT, I think. Anyway, so just things like that. Isn't that great? Instead of saying, well, I've talked to you enough, can I go and talk to somebody more interesting? Or, more likely, you seem bored with me. It's great talking to you, good eye contact, real energy, yada, yada. Or you must meet Alex, yada, yada. So that kind of thing. Isn't that a great thing? Because then you've created a bit of structure and another Daniel Kahneman piece of science. Anyone come across the peak-end rule? Which is, we remember the end, where you've been really having a great time with somebody and say, yeah, okay, thanks so much. And we remember the end more than the rest.
For that bit in the middle, another one of our colleagues, Julie Batty, she used to be the researcher on desert island discs. So her job was to get celebrities drunk and tell her things. And the technique that she teaches, for just the bit over the croissants, is you say, oh, how did you get here today? And the person says, oh, I came on the bus. And Julie goes, the bus? And she says, yeah, they just keep talking. And then they get to the end of the next sentence and they say, you know, and I had a lovely weekend and I was there with my family. Well, your family. And it really works. People will keep talking.
That's yes and.
Yes.
Just saying yes, family, I've repeated it. And the energy you give to saying family, bus, means they'll go, yeah. Because again, I found, when you're talking about yourself, there's lots of dopamine in your body. Did you know that? And when you're talking about me, there's lots of dopamine as well. So all you're doing is giving dopamine hits.
But I mean, taking that into a session, though, often the end of a training session is quite difficult. It's often quite open-ended. In a minute, we're going to have questions from these guys. It is often the questiony bit. Do you have a kind of technique to bring that to a sort of satisfying close so it doesn't just feel like it's petered out?
It sounds obvious, but people don't remember much of what they've heard. So I am usually trying to recap the most important stuff at the end. It's callback, right, in comedy terms. And again, there's all the behavioural science about if you get people to commit to something publicly, at that point they are much more likely to live up to it. So, here's what we did, and what are you going to do? That is a common thing to do for a reason.
I used to get people to write a postcard to themselves and then post it later. Nowadays, I get people to video one another. It's quite fun. So they make a commitment. It always is a bit of a, because we've had lots of fun during the day, and then the bit at the end can be a bit of a letdown. Everyone go now. It's kind of, you try and remember what's the most important thing. Try and use their words. So as I always tell people, stand-up comedians tend to do their best joke at the beginning or the end, and their second best at the end or the beginning. So try and make the ending good, again, because of that's what they'll remember. But if they've created the ending, so much the better. But it is hard to get the right energy such that they don't saunter off, or it doesn't become a bit kind of, well, where's that come from? Suddenly he's standing up and doing something different. What I would say is, apropos the title, when I started doing this 26 years ago, I was very clear on, I'm coming from a la-di-da, woolly thinking world, apparently, and I'm talking to businesses who are very much in terms of data, P&L, KPIs, ROI, and I needed to show, if you do this, you will come out with that. And I went to Canary Wharf with an investment banker once, and they said, I was talking about what I do, it's about working together and listening, and they said, what are the deliverables? What are the outcomes? I'd never heard the word deliverable. And so I wanted to have the business talk right down. And so I thought, I'm coming from the world of comedy, but I must emphasize the hard-nosed skills that I'm giving them. And then very often at the end of the day, somebody will say, the boss or somebody will say, you know, we have had such a laugh together today, and we don't do that at work. And I'm thinking, if I've done nothing more than that, I've done well. Because I've shown they can have a laugh, an inclusive laugh, because we've all laughed at our own mistakes. And that's quite important. I wonder how much people do laugh at work. Does anyone know they've done 10,000 steps? Does anyone know they've had their fruit and veg, 5 a day? Maybe. Does anyone go to work and think, how many times have we laughed together? A laughter audit. And I think we can create that for a day, can't we? Because we're in a safe space for outsiders. But my hope is to say, kind of go, that comedy, with a small c, is a legitimate, and luckily there's data to show, if we're laughing together, we'll be more productive.
That feels like a lovely note to ask some of these people if they have any questions. So is there anything that...
Rachel, hello. You see, it was good to sit in the front row.
Great, thank you. Really enjoyed what you were talking about, and as Kelly, my colleague as well, those cynics that you were talking about. We have a couple in our organisation who come up quite frequently. But the question that I have is around graveyard shift after lunch, or when you're starting to sense a bit of a lull, is how you bring everyone back. Are there any key tools or techniques or different activities that you can rely on that you personally use?
Well, first of all, people call it the graveyard shift. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I'd say bring in definition, frankly, because we do the same energy whether it's graveyard shift or not. After breakfast, last thing at the day, we always have to know we're monitoring the energy. We know, you can see the shape of what we're offering. We have to get buy-in fairly quickly. There are lots of little icebreaker games you can do, but I think, if I'm being honest, a lot of internal speakers aren't very good. So get somebody to train them, if they're in that slot. Training doesn't have to be very long. It can be just helping them beef up the material, then the confidence in their performance. If you're bringing an external speaker, they should be able to cope with that lull in energy, is my opinion.
I love the graveyard shift, partly because it's where expectations are low, right? And then you can take people by surprise, or the 9 a.m. slot after the night out before. And there's a rule that quite often we give to people in terms of their performance, which is say the worst thing that your audience is thinking.
Yes.
Because if you say it, then you get points for awareness, and then it's out there. So I will always comment on the fact that it's the graveyard shift. And, that person just got 3/4 of a yawn from that person because they had the extra pudding or whatever. And then it's being in on the joke. Right.
Thank you. I've got a question, and that also then demonstrates empathy with the audience.
Yeah.
And if you can, sense how they're feeling. We don't always have the luxury of doing face-to-face training. So any tips for kind of when you've got a global audience and they're on Zoom, and maybe there's more than you can accommodate. Not everyone puts themselves on camera.
Let me just repeat the question for the tape. We've talked about face-to-face, easy to do some of this stuff. What about when it's virtual, on Teams? And I would say, you said not everyone puts their camera on. I insist on it. I insist. They have to, because what I'm talking about is how you are on camera. And you may have some wonderful tips, but 5 years ago when lockdown happened, I said to somebody who'd done a lot of training on Zoom with global teams before COVID, I said, can I stand up? And she said, I don't see why not. So I stand up, and anybody on training presentation, stand up, face-to-face, virtual, stand up. That means raise the camera to eye level. And there's so much more energy you can use there. So, and I use every virtual workshop is as interactive as a face-to-face one, as interactive as an improv show. Getting straight in to, hello Trina, how are you today? Put things in chat. There's some neuroscience, by the way. David Rock of the Neuro Leadership Institute, I can send it to you, but you can search for 5 ways to use virtual calls to create energy. So he's saying things like keep interactive as possible. Make sure the sound is good. Does anyone have any colleagues or friends who've got a headset and they sound like this? Hello, I'm in a World War II movie. Take off the headset. I can't hear you. And I did a workshop with the documentary filmmakers years ago, and they said, when you're making a documentary, the shot may be not very good. You're running along, the camera's on, you see feet. But if the sound's good, the audience will be with you. So simple things like don't be in a kitchen where it's all bum, 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 echoey, vibratory, like that. Make it as interactive as possible. Get people saying things. I would say don't blur your background so they can look, oh, I see you've got a pair of socks there. And one guy said once, what are those pictures of aeroplanes? He said, well, those are the planes I flew in Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay, tell me more.
Afghanistan?
Yes, exactly. But there's a guy called Mark Bowden. Anyone come across him? Body language expert, brilliant. He's so good, he teaches Zoom employees how to do body language on Zoom. And he says, why not put something in your shot that says something about you? So we lean and go, that's a picture. Well, that's interesting. And then we've got something to talk about. We break the ice. So David Rock, neuroleadership guy, would say, he talks about parallel processing. Get people talking in chat. So my first question is, who's wearing socks? Where are you? Not just in the world, but are you in the living room, the dining room, your children's spare bedroom? So make it as interactive as possible, because the data again says if you delay people, if you don't speak for a while, somebody who's in the background, if they don't speak for a while, it becomes harder and harder for them to speak, because the longer they wait before they say anything, the harder it is, because I've got to say something really good. So comedy, involve the audience, tease yourself, be slightly disruptive by not talking about KPIs, who's wearing socks, or what's that going on in the background, or I can't see you because you've got a window behind you, or it's okay, go and answer the door at Amazon. Anything like that to create connection. So it's just tiring. It should actually be more tiring than face-to-face. You've got to create the energy. Again, small thing. When you watch TV, how many edits are there in a minute? How many different pictures do you see? 20 or so. When I'm watching Zoom or Teams, how many cuts are there? 0. One person droning on, or maybe a slide and there's a thumbnail or just a disembodied voice. So they call it, Zoom fatigue versus Netflix intrigue. So that's why stand up, move it about. And my final point is the neuroscience says change the dynamic every 3 to 5 minutes. i.e. get somebody else talking, get something in chat, have a different slide or something. And our attention span in 2000 was about 12 minutes. By 2020, it was about 5 minutes. I'm sure it's now about 15 seconds. Look at the stats for how long people watch TikTok videos. 7 seconds before they get bored. We're competing with that, not directly, but that's the shape of our brain now.
And there's a couple of things that I think good trainers would do face-to-face, but you just do it more so on video. So we're doing it now, but if you're face-to-face in a room, you're reading the audience and who's interested and who's tuned out slightly. That's why you need the videos on. And it takes people by surprise if you still do that on Teams. So, I will go, oh, Trina, you look a bit quizzical about that. And they're suddenly aware that they are an audience. And then I find actually everyone gets much more engaged because they realise that you are interested in them.
That's hard to do though. So are you always having 2 monitors?
No.
I used to.
I don't, sorry.
Because I find I've got to have a screen with my audience and a screen.
So where do you look? Which camera do you look at?
I'm kind of, if I know the content, I'm trying to look at.
Can I tell you something I really don't like, which is the camera's here and somebody's looking here.
Yeah, and then
Okay, did you hear that noise? Okay, so I would suggest that you have the content on paper, blue tack to the wall, above the camera. Can you do that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're reading the content.
So where do you have the content otherwise?
Well, so often you're kind of doing it because it's content that you're familiar with.
So what's the second screen doing?
So because I'm sharing slides, so I'm making sure that the slides are visible.
Okay.
And I'm monitoring the chat.
It may be.
There is a trick, which is too long to go into here, but so that you can see your stuff and you can see people at the same time.
Neil has a way. I never did any slides at all until 2020. I did it all on flip chart. because my order wasn't always set. And people might, as you can see, I think of things on the fly. But I had to make slides, but I don't like slides because they can't see me. So what I do is I do talk, exercise, tell them what I think, get them to write things in chat, and then do slides at the end of a chapter. 3 or 4 slides just to rekindle their interest and then move on. I don't know if your content will work for that. This sounds possible, good. I've seen some great presentations where we didn't see the person at all, by the way, but their voice was totally energized. And by the way, one thing more in chat that's from the neuroscience is if I was to ask you something now and you'd all answered, I have to go you, then you, then you. But in chat, you can all write an answer at the same time. You can get 10 responses straight away. It's even better than face-to-face. And then you can say, that's interesting. You've said X. Tell us more about that. I do things like, I'll be coming to you in a minute, Trina, to ask you about cheese, whatever. And then Trina's going, oh, out of breath. So you give her a little moment to think. And of course, you don't have to learn the names either because they're there. So if you say somebody's name, they're much more likely to give you a response than, how does everyone feel about leadership? Whereas if you say, I'm coming to you in a minute, Kelly, we'll be asking you about X. And then, so she's got time to think. It's
actually quite interesting because that's there's different kinds of training because there's different subjects. So a lot of the time we're talking about things like presentation training, storytelling, even writing to a certain extent you can do as a group activity. Because even if you write something on your own, you can then share it with somebody else, edit. I mean, we do things like training people on AI prompts. And they've got to be in front of a laptop because they can't practice it if they're not. How do you keep the energy in the room, keep the interactivity when they're trying to do something that also means they've got to go away for a minute and do something on their own?
I mean, the logic is, I would say, still the same. I mean, all these things, Zoom, whatever it is, Teams, people having to look at screens, they're just, in the end, roadblocks that you have to find your way around. All the other stuff that we've been talking about, all the behavioural science stuff, can apply to AI training. You know, take it to the extreme and then pull it back. There's this thing called generation effect, which says that people are more likely to learn something if they've discovered it for themselves, rather than if you've just told them how to do it and they've copied it. So you need to structure your session so that they feel like they're discovering, even if you know what you want them to discover at the end of it. So, yeah, it's even possible with all of that stuff.
Well, are you in the same room as them when doing the AI prompt?
Sometimes.
So they'll look at you when you're talking.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's about engagement and energy, dare I say. And there's probably one more, but while I think of it before I fall over, does anyone think, oh, but I'm not very funny? This may be fine for these people.
Never had that thought.
So it's okay. I say, in terms of leadership, suddenly I've got to do a joke. No, allow laughter to be. And you can have a funny-ish slide. But if somebody says something funny, don't tell them off. So we don't all have to be funny ourselves, but allow comedy to be part of the moment.
And also, lots of the stuff that we're talking about today, or at least some of it, is about things like the structural aspects of comedy, for instance, like the callback thing, which needn't apply to something funny at all. You could be doing that with something deadly serious. And in fact, when we're doing presentations training, I find, actually, because we're British, a lot of people want to default to comedy and being funny. And it works, but I would say, wouldn't it be really interesting if actually you were really serious about that? Or you really shared something personal about that, and it does the same job of the emotional connection, but you have to be a bit braver to do it, probably.
Yeah, that's right. The strongest thing you can do is the callback. Do you know what we mean by that? In improv, we call it the reincorporation. Somebody said something, you come back to it an hour later, 5 minutes later. So, Debbie, I'm interested in Florida, for example. But of course, you can see, did that get a laugh? Did it in any way humiliate Debbie? No. It's an easy, inclusive laugh where you think, oh, right, somebody's remembered something about me. We all feel, oh, that's our story today. It was Florida and unpleasant moments over croissant or something. The callback, or we call reincorporation, is an easy way to create a smile.
And for the group, it proves you're listening as well. You're not just there doing it on autopilot.
Yes.
You've been paying attention and you care.
You see that a lot on talk shows, like Graham Norton,
Yeah.
when he's got celebrity guests, and they'll like play off of each other.
Yeah, it's a simple laugh, if you like, if that's what you need at that moment. But also, it shows you're engaged with this group now. They matter to you. You're not just regurgitating what you've done before. Are you waving your hand or just?
Can I go?
What's your name?
Sorry, Dougal. I'm a journalist at Business.
Oh yes, Dougal. Yes, hello.
I've got 10 questions. No, I'm doing the slam the door technique, so it's actually only 2. One is a physical thing. Before you go out and perform or do a session, do you have any techniques like breathing exercises that I know some comedians do to get yourself pumped up? And the second thing is, are you sometimes training like C-suite people rather than general employees? And do you need a slightly different approach with them, like puncturing their bubble a little bit?
Interesting. I often train CEOs, very senior people, who've got a presentation to do. It's the very opposite of puncturing their bubble. What has often happened is that a team of 5 people have created slides for them. 173 slides. And they go through them, and you can see their life just ebbing away. And then you say, that was great, right? You've covered a lot of stuff there. Now tell me what keeps you awake at night. What are you worried about? What are the opportunities? And then they go, oh. Then they start getting animated. And they're like 11-year-olds reading out their English essay. So CEOs, C-suite people, they need exactly the same level of psychological interaction as anybody, actually. In some ways more because they may have more to lose. And so it's nice to work with them one-on-one where they can be quite honest with you, which they couldn't perhaps be in other environments. Yes, you have to defer to their achievements and all the stuff they're having to do. Sometimes I had to go into the city at 7 a.m. to work with one person in banking because that's all the time they could afford. But C-suite, same thing really. Rules, keep the waffle down. My favorite thing is tell a story. Then you don't have to learn lines, because who here likes learning lines? It's hard because then they've got to remember all the things, and often they don't remember it. They just look at a slide and then turn away from the audience, and it's deeply dull. Whereas if they tell a story and can extract from that some sort of learning, insight, reflection, fine, much better.
On the getting ready bit, luckily most of the time I don't have to do the breathing stuff anymore, but I will if it's something big and I'm nervous, and it makes a big difference to a lot of people. Actually, the thing I need to do is suss out the space. That's what makes me feel comfortable. Okay, how close can I get to the edge before I start to teeter and I'm going to fall off? Or how far can I go into the audience and still be seen? When we run presentations training, really often, just to trip them up, what I will do in a situation like this is I'll put a chair on the stage. It's really amazing how most people don't touch the chair. It's like God put the chair there and they cannot move it. So they end up doing stood here, and they'll be moving. And there's something about, people are so nervous often in this situation that they think they don't have control over anything. And a really good lesson is just to go, you can move the chair. You can set this room up how you want it so that you're good.
And interestingly, if the first person does use the chair, everyone else then does. Your question about getting ready, same as Neil. And I always get there very early. And if anyone I'm teaching a presentation, I say, get there early, walk the space. Even if you've got a friend who sits at the back before breakfast, do your thing, just do a sound check. Get used to this. Okay, here's a thing for women. Anybody here ever had to do a presentation where you've got one of these mics?
Yeah.
Where do you put this thing, the pack?
In the tights.
In the tights or in the bra. So this is, I always say to female presenters, is the world, as in many cases, has been designed for men. Okay, so great. So I don't know where, Alex, you put yours. Okay, so we have belts, we have back pockets, we have even inside jacket here. So I say get there early, have a rider, which means you send in advance what you need, i.e. you need rehearsal time. If you're a woman, they can provide a pouch. So Suki Webster, who's married to Paul Merton, made her own. Some elastic with a sock. Because otherwise, it's, there's some sound person doing their best not to touch your bra. Where do you put it? Simple things like that. But in terms of prep, for myself, I get there early and walk the space. Where are the dead spots? Because very often for conference stages, there's no light at the sweet spot of the stage. Why is that? Because it would bleed into where the slides are. slide screen here or slide screens there. So the place you want to be is there. So I find where the light is. Where's the lectern? Can we get rid of that? Can I pour a glass of water, which then stay for an hour because I'm on next? Because what happens in conferences, somebody's job is to clear the room, so they clear away anything, and they'll put some nice unopened bottle of fizzy water, and you suddenly want a drink, so you go fizz everywhere, can't open it, break the bottle, whatever. So I always set a pint glass of still water for myself. So that's what I do, that's kind of the theatre of it, but I get there very early, I put on a different shirt to get my show face on, and just realize that you're about to put yourself through something which is more stressful than just having conversations. An actor once told me that in a theatre performance, there's as much adrenaline as in a car crash. I don't know if that's true, but I'm pretending it is. It's deeply unnatural to be in front of people to talk, isn't it? The only time we have that in real life, in nature, is when lions are looking at the prey. So that's why you should feel nervous and should do lots of preparation. But how many times, especially people who are very good at their job, they don't think about what they're going to have to go through. So no stand-up will saunter in at the last minute. No stand-up will go in with unrehearsed things. They'll know their material, and they'll know their beginning and ending, and they'll work out where the light is. They'll probably watch the 3 acts before them as well.
I just want to come back to what you said about C-suite, because it was just really interesting from the point of view that a lot of what I do in training writing is train people to stop making assumptions about their audience. And that question of, but shouldn't we write it differently for the C-suite? Shouldn't we do something differently for all of them? It's the people in between everyone else and the C-suite that tend to do some of the most incomprehensible and difficult writing, because they're trying to do things for the C-suite. So that's probably what I'd say to all of you who are thinking about planning training for different levels of the organisation. It's not different training. It might be shorter because those people have less time, but it won't be different content. It won't be a different approach.